Hello everyone. Hopefully at this point in time, if you're doing the pre-module work for our Introduction to Systematic Reviews searching course, you've looked at some of the basics of searching with Boolean operators using subject headings and keywords to construct your search. Additionally, this video would be viewed ideally after you looked at the NNLM videos on how PubMed works. These are both great starting places if you've never used PubMed, just to familiarize yourself with PubMed and how it works. And on another note, we'll be using PubMed for this class instead of Ovid Medline. There are a lot of systematic review librarians who like or prefer Ovid Medline for searching, but the reason our library has chosen to use PubMed is because it's freely available around the globe, and so therefore your search strategies can be more reproducible for folks in other countries or places where they may not have the resources or access to Ovid products. So that's our only reason for using PubMed versus the other one. So there are some principles with systematic review searching in PubMed that are a little bit different than what you would do for your typical evidence search or looking for a literature review, like we would typically maybe run as a medical librarian for a patron, a student, or a faculty member. The difference with the systematic review search is we're looking to create the most sensitive search possible on the topic so that we won't miss out on any literature that could potentially be included as evidence for the systematic review. So keep in mind, these tips are to create the most sensitive search that we can create in PubMed. So the recall is going to be higher. There may be some less relevant articles included in our search results, but we'll make sure that we're not missing any articles that might need to be screened in the review process. Alternatively, a lot of times when we're doing a literature review or narrative review type of search in PubMed, we're looking for a more specific set of articles that really fit with the topic that we're looking for. And, we don't want to deliver, more than 100, 150 articles to our person to comb through. And that's just an estimate of what I would normally do for a lit search for someone. Whereas with systematic reviews, it could have up to 1,000 results or even more depending on the scope of their topic. It's always entirely dependent, the search result, on the topic and how specific the person is when they're coming to you with their request. So with that in mind, there's a few principles I want to address for searching in PubMed. The first thing we want to do to create the most sensitive search is to first include a combination of keywords and controlled vocabulary or mesh terms. So I'm going to only do one concept group for the purpose of this search, and I'm going to do, let's do celiac disease just for fun. So I would, of course, want to include celiac disease, and I can go in and use my field code in square brackets, TIAB, to tell the database I only want this term to come up in the title or abstract of my search. And then I would OR that with my controlled vocabulary term. So if you go to just a Google search and go to MESH, you'll be able to find the NIH NCBI MESH database here. And I'm going to go in and search for celiac disease. And this will give me first the MESH term, which is celiac disease. So I'm going to bring that over here with the MESH term. And a lot of times when we're doing a search, we will put the MESH term first, and then we also want to include the exact same phrase, celiac disease, as a keyword term to make sure we're picking up that exact phrase search as both a MESH term in the controlled vocabulary of the article and as a keyword in the title and abstract of the article. And then the nice thing about the MESH database is I can also go down here and I can pick from these. We don't need to include the inverted terms because PubMed won't really read those properly anyways, but I can include any of these other terms. So I'll just show you what that looks like. So what I'm going to do actually is pull up a Word document just so I can organize that a little bit better before I throw it into the PubMed search. So here's the list that it gave me. And so first I can really take out any of these inverted terms because we're going to include them the right way around anyways. So I'm taking these out. And then you'll notice for this last term, we have celiac sprue, non-tropical sprue, and sprue. And honestly, if we just include sprue, then all of these terms would be redundant because it's going to automatically have that keyword. So this would be a good list of keywords for my list of keywords for this particular concept. And we're just going to do one concept group for this search. Normally, you would want to combine it with the topic for something else. So like a gluten-free diet or a particular drug that's being trialed for celiac disease, and then perhaps an outcome group of what type of thing you're looking for. So less intestinal inflammation or something like that. So these are my ORD keyword terms, and I'm going to put those in. And so then we'll hit search. This is going to be a big search. So this is going to include anything that has celiac disease tagged as a mesh term or any of those other keywords that we search for. So this is a pretty good, if we look at the advanced search, this is a pretty good specific search to capture celiac disease. You can also very much include other keywords in this grouping that relate to celiac disease if the mesh database you think it's not complete enough. So 28,000 results. Keep in mind this is just one concept group. We would normally AND it with another concept group. Let's go back to the results. Now there's normally when we'd be doing kind of a narrative review search or lit review search or trying to get search results for a medical practitioner or helping a student do a search or something like that, a lot of times we'll tell people to filter by these filters on the left-hand side, right? So, for the purposes of a lit review, you might say, okay, we'll just do last 5 years. Or perhaps the person wanting the search wants to know the latest evidence on the topic. So they want 5 years or past just 1 year of anything coming out on celiac disease. But typically, unless there's a good reason for the systematic review to limit it by a date range, for example, one of the examples I can think of is if it's on something to do with the internet and the internet didn't really come out until 1993, you could limit your search results back to 1993. And that's something that you and the authors can write into the methodology of why you chose that date range. But if you don't have a really good reason, typically with systematic reviews, we're not going to limit by publication date range because, again, we're trying to make the most sensitive search, not the most specific search. And then the other thing you might think to do is, let's say we're looking for celiac disease, we're looking for drug trials. So your person has said we only want randomized controlled trials to be included in our search. So you might think, well, why don't I just use the filter for randomized controlled trial? That would cut down in this particular search 28,000 to 254 results. So this is a lot nicer for that person to go through. But this is not necessarily something that we want to do. The reason being these filters are not always applied in the same way across all articles. This is something that that the person who's indexing the articles would do. And oftentimes, let's see if there's difference. So there's 254 results here. Sometimes if we're looking at the most recent articles, like for example, this one, this one just came out December 2025. This one may not, if it was a randomized controlled trial, it may not have yet been tagged in the system as a randomized controlled trial. So we have to be careful with these article type filters, because sometimes with the latest literature coming out, the literature won't have a tag yet. Or, for example, it could be tagged as a systematic review, it could really be a literature review, or it could be tagged as a review and not a systematic review. So it's not that these are not useful, they're very good for literature searches. But in the event of the systematic review search, we don't really want to use these. We would want to use a validated search hedge for randomized controlled trials, and those are things that we'll cover in the course. And search hedges, you can also look for validated ones that you can add on to the end of your search strategy to limit to RCTs. You can find those online that have actually been validated. So I would stay away from using these type of filters. The last two things I'm going to say, there are additional filters like article language. Again, we don't really want to, unless we've specified in the review protocol that we're only going to look at English language articles, we don't want to limit by language. And we also don't want to really use the not Boolean operator unless it's something that really makes sense. Because again, the reasoning behind not using the not operator is if we used the not operator, it could potentially eliminate some search results for our very sensitive search that we're doing. So these are kind of general rules of thumb. I would stay away from using the preset filters in any of the databases. The other reason being for that is if we include all of our search terms in a research paper, and then we also have the search terms from the search hedge to limit it, like AND it with randomized controlled trials search hedge, that's something that can easily then be replicable and copied and pasted back into PubMed, and that exact search can be run again. But if you're using the filters that exist in the system, you're not going to get that replicability in those exact results. So these are just a couple of the things about searching in PubMed for constructing a systematic review search that are a little bit different than what we would do for just a general literature search for a patron in our medical libraries. So I'm going to go over those principles one more time. The first thing is we always want to use a combination of any of the mesh or applicable keyword terms for every single concept group that we're searching for. I would stay away from using these pre-designed filters. If you can look for a validated search hedge to limit it down to something, that's fine. Or if you can add on, for example, if we add 5 years, I can go in my search details and see that we ANDed year 5 filter. So this would be the search strategy to then copy and paste and use this, because this is more replicable than checking off a box of 5 years, okay? We don't typically use the not Boolean operator for a very sensitive search unless, again, there's like a very good reason to not something, because you just don't always know what you could be eliminating that you didn't think of. And just keep in mind, yes, this is a very different type of searching. We're creating a very sensitive search. So the principles are slightly different than maybe what we would normally do for a quick search. All right, well, I hope you found this informative. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or the other course instructors.